we have to distinguish again between matters of discipline and matters of faith. You will see why. Now, and we have to distinguish between objective heresy and subjective heresy, and between material heresy and formal heresy. As a pope does not cease to be pope because he's in sin, not even when it's public sin. A pope ceases to be pope when he is in formal heresy. Canon law always stated, and the new code of canon law says the same thing. Someone who is objectively in heresy, who is in formal heresy, who is in the subjective sin of heresy, cannot hold office. But I explained on another occasion that as long as the Pope does not make his heresies, and there are enough of them, as long as he does not make his heresies formal, he's Pope. He's just a man who is in error, who says the wrong things, but does not say this is a new teaching, a new doctrine, and I say this in spite of the councils before. He doesn't want to contradict. See, I told you about the mistaken concept of tradition the present Pope has. Now, within this mistaken concept of tradition, the mistaken concept on a tradition that changes with the times and with the understanding of the faithful and their studies and their experiences, quoting again De Verbum 8, the Pope will say certain things that are against church doctrine, but he will always say in accordance to tradition. So they make it manifest that they do not want to be heretics. They make it, Pope John Paul II makes it abundantly clear that he does not want to contradict the definitions of the Council of Trent, but to interpret them in a new way that is fitting to our present times. That makes him a material heretic. It means the heresy is there. The matter of heresy is there. The heresy is there. But the intention is not there. And if I do not know and do not see, I cannot commit a sin. I cannot commit a mortal sin unless I know, want to, and in a grave matter. That's the definition of mortal sin. And heresy is a mortal sin. It's one of the worst sins possible. But there have to be three conditions. Grave matter, well, matter of the faith is always grave matter. Knowledge and intention. To be quite frank with you, the present Pope is a very lousy theologian because his philosophy is all screwed up. And I doubt he knows what he's saying. Doesn't make you a formal heretic.
Well, you believe he's the Pope?
Yeah, that's the reason why. Because you see, when I heard Dr. Martin Luther said, the church is wrong, and I say, he immediately was a heretic. He knew it, he wanted it, and the matter was there.
But you must follow the Pope now.
You must what?
You must follow the Pope.
I must follow the Pope in everything that is not against church tradition. But if it is against church, and mind you, I have to prove it. The Pope doesn't have to prove anything to me. I have to prove to him that he's wrong. Well, that's pretty easy with him, I honestly tell you, because I just read the syllabus of Pius IX, and there you have the same thing that the present Pope says, except that Pius IX condemned it. So that leads me to a very important point before I finally answer the question on Sedevacancy, on the Sedevacantist. I have to prove that the Pope is wrong. He does not have to prove to me that he is Catholic and that what he says is according to church tradition. I have to prove to him that he's wrong, and I can't do that. But
another objection is the Pope is only a material heretic. First of all, I would respond that we're not really talking about his personal heresies here. We're talking about Vatican II and its reforms. The personal heresies of each of these men, and they exist, also argue to their being non-popes. But that is not the principal argument of Sedevacantism, that he said this, or he said that, or he did this. It all goes back to Vatican II. What is Vatican II? What are its reforms? That's the first thing I would answer. The second thing is that the only way in which you could pronounce a heresy and not be guilty, that is, not be a formal heretic, is by ignorance. So if a farmer who can't read or write says there are 4 persons in the Trinity, anybody in his right mind would say, well, he doesn't know, he's never been instructed, the poor man just doesn't know. He's a material heretic. That does not corrupt the virtue of faith, if through ignorance you do not know. Are we going to say for one moment that a person like Ratzinger is ignorant? That he doesn't know Catholic doctrine? That he was born in the 1920s, raised as a Catholic? Or Bergoglio, born in the 1930s, raised as a Catholic in a very pious Italian family? That he doesn't know Catholic doctrine? He said, for example, I do not believe, and this is a quotation, I do not believe in a Catholic God. There is no Catholic God. It's a quotation from Bergoglio in that interview with that atheist. So the argument that he's only a material heretic is, I would respond, absurd, because it is absurd to say that someone like Ratzinger or Wojtyła or Bergoglio does not know the Catholic faith.
When confronting the Sedevacantist argument, R&R's last line of defense has customarily been the distinction between a public material heretic and a public formal heretic. A public material heretic is someone who externally denies a truth of the divine and Catholic faith ignorantly and innocently, and a public formal heretic is one who does so willingly and culpably. Only a formal heretic, their argument goes, truly puts himself outside the church. A material heretic, Mr. Ferrer argues here, doesn't. The post-conciliar popes cannot be shown to have been formal heretics, either because no one warned them of their heresies, no orthodoxy buddies, or because, as liberals, their minds can't conceive of objective truth. This is Bishop Williamson's Anti-Sedevacantism, or empty mind theory. But an argument based on this distinction, like the put the Pope on trial first scenario, is no longer theologically tenable. It was shot down in the 20th century by Pius XII's 1943 encyclical Mystici Corporis. The theologian Van Noort explained. The same pontiff has explicitly pointed out that unlike other sins, heresy, schism, and apostasy automatically sever a man from the church. For not every sin, however grave and enormous it be, is such as to sever a man automatically from the body of the church, as does schism or heresy or apostasy. Note exactly what Pius XII teaches. The sin of heresy automatically severs one from the body of the church. On the basis of this passage in Mystici Corporis, Van Noort goes on to explain why it is untenable to claim that public material heretics nevertheless remain members of the church. If public material heretics remained members of the church, the visibility and unity of Christ's church would perish. If these purely material heretics were considered members of the Catholic Church in the strict sense of the term, how would one ever locate the Catholic Church? How would the church be one body? How would it profess one faith? Where would be its visibility? Where its unity? And indeed, this is the dilemma we traditional Catholics face. If you insist that the post-conciliar popes, with all their myriad heresies, errors, scandalous public gestures, and faith-destroying laws, were still members of the church before their election and afterwards. You destroy the visibility of the church as a column of truth. So, R&R's last emergency exit, the claim that the post-conciliar popes were merely material heretics and therefore still members of the church and also therefore true popes, has been slammed shut in the 20th century by Pius XII. Moreover, as I mentioned in Chapter 2 of Work of Human Hands, Mystici Corporis was one of several documents that Pius XII issued to rebuke errors being spread by the modernist wing of the European liturgical movement, whose adherents and supporters 20 years later would go on to give us the horrors of Vatican II and the new Mass. Since Pius XII lays down a principle which allows us to explain how the men who perpetrated these horrors could not have been either true popes or even Catholics, it is impossible not to believe that the pontiff promulgated Mystici Corporis when he did, thanks to a special disposition of God's providence. For those of us who, more than 70 years later, are still seeking to make sense of what happened in the church, it came just in time, God's own time.